Alrighty, guys. It has been 10 years. 10 years almost exactly since the release of Season 1 of Jessica Jones. And today, in a segment on the Access Blockbusters Pod, we are going to be taking some time to take a look back on the second standalone series in the Netflix Marvel Universe. Now, apparently, and I mean, based on what we've seen from Daredevil Born Again, that now the show is canon to the MCU, the original Daredevil series, and now with the news that Jessica Jones is going to be joining Daredevil in Daredevil Born Again Season 2, the assumption is here that Jessica Jones is now, the show, Jessica Jones is going to be canon as well. The 3 seasons and, of course, her role in the Defenders is now going to be canon in the MCU. So, continuing on with our Defenders Saga rewatch, which is what I've been doing in the background of course, producing our weekly podcast episode and, of course, producing quietly, just in case we need a, kind of a rainy day, the DCEU rewatch, which we'll hopefully be releasing new episodes of in the near future. But in the meantime, in terms of television as well, I've been doing a rewatch of the Defender Saga. And actually, to be completely transparent with you guys before we dive into Jessica Jones Season 1, I actually haven't seen a majority of the Defender Saga. When I originally came out, I watched Daredevil Season 1, Daredevil Season 2, The Defenders, and then Daredevil Season 3. And to be honest, the main reason why was just because, A, there was a huge volume of shows to watch, and at that point I just didn't have time or didn't want to watch it, and because also, B, I watched the first episode of Jessica Jones at the time, and I wasn't a huge fan of it. And maybe it was just because it wasn't what I was expecting based on Daredevil, because I love Daredevil, but it just wasn't what I was expecting. And so I decided, I was doing a rewatch of Daredevil because I wanted to do a rewatch of Daredevil and then, dive right into Daredevil Born Again Season 1. And hopefully we'll do that at the end of this whole Defender Saga rewatch. And who knows, honestly, we might not even get to every single show in the Defender Saga before Daredevil Season 2, Daredevil Born Again Season 2 comes out. But anyways, my goal was to do a rewatch of all of the Daredevil shows and then dive into Daredevil Season 1 again as a rewatch. And I decided, let's just give the Defender Saga, let's at the very least give Jessica Jones a try. And I'm glad I did, because I didn't even know that Jessica Jones was going to be confirmed for Daredevil Born Again Season 2. I just started watching the series for the first time, actually at the very beginning of Daredevil Born Again Season 1, not even knowing what the ending of Daredevil Born Again Season 1 was going to be, not even knowing that Jessica Jones was going to be confirmed for Season 2. And so here we are. I watched Jessica Jones for the first time. I guess I rewatched Episode 1 only. And let's talk about it, guys. This is going to be a spoiler breakdown. It's a revisiting, right? Because I put in the title Jessica Jones Season 1 10 years later, because it's been 10 years. Jessica Jones Season 1 released in 2015. I know it's not exactly 10 years, but I'm just going off the year 2015 to 2025. Let's talk about Jessica Jones Season 1. And this is going to be from the perspective of someone who hasn't seen the whole show. I saw her in The Defenders, but didn't know much else about her. So, Jessica Jones Season 1. Full spoilers, obviously, for the show for the first season. And I haven't seen the other season, so I don't really know what happens, although I got a couple things spoiled for me as I was doing research. And that's unfortunate, but, we'll live with that. These shows have been out for a while, so it's kind of on me at this point. So, Jessica Jones Season 1, obviously played by Kristen Ritter. We have Kilgrave, played by David Tennant, and then obviously other supporting characters as well. I don't know all the actors and actresses' names, but, we have Trish, we have Hogarth, played by Carrie-Anne Moss, and then Malcolm. Other characters also show up, like I don't remember the actress's name. I never remember because she's just Ashley from The Boys, but she has a role in here as well. And then quick cameo from Rosario Dawson as Claire Temple in the finale. We have Simpson, the police officer, turned ally, turned villain, I guess, at the end of the show, and other supporting characters as well. So this show, right, follows Jessica Jones, who is a private investigator, and she is she has a dark past, as most of these heroes in the Defenders saga, tend to have, and she's very clearly haunted by that past because Kilgrave returns into her life. So she was under Kilgrave's control for a while, and then she goes on these adventures. And Luke Cage, I forgot to mention, Mike Coulter is a big part of this series. He's basically I would say the biggest supporting character in the show, next to maybe Trish. But Mike Coulter as Luke Cage is a very prominent character in the show, and he's intertwined into the story because Jessica Jones killed his wife under the control of Kilgrave. So really, this show, right? Because I didn't know what to expect, really, other than just based on the first episode. It's going to be a little bit more cynical, right? Jessica Jones. Well, Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock is, I wouldn't say he's an optimist. He does believe in the best, in humanity. Jessica Jones is a very cynical character. And right off the bat, I think one of the reasons why it was originally so hard for me to get on board with the show after watching the first episode all those years ago was just because this is a character that is not going to endear you to her. You're watching the show because, Kristen Ritter is a great performer, great actress, and she does a great job. But this isn't a character that is going to make you go, yeah, like rooting for her. I mean, you're rooting for her because of her circumstances and her, the anti-hero vigilante sort of vibe of I'm going to make things right despite all the terrible things I've done. And that's good and all. But it's not the same as Daredevil, who has, the moral compass of I'm really struggling with this, but I want to be a hero. I want to be a good person. And I think that is one of the key struggles. That's one of the reasons why I just don't think Jessica Jones season 1 is as good as any of the seasons of Daredevil. The original show, I don't know about Daredevil Born Again, to be quite honest with you. It's only been about a month and a half, so need to let that simmer for a little bit. But in terms of the Netflix shows, I don't remember the Defenders that well. But I don't think that Jessica Jones season 1 is nearly as good as any of the seasons of Daredevil. And I think that it's just because while I think Kristen Ritter does a good job of showing the multidimensionality of Jessica, the show, she's painted as a character who is just so down on life and so jaded that it makes it hard for us to get behind her. Just in terms of rooting for her. But she's an interesting character, and I think that's the reason that we're following her in the first place. The other thing, and I hate to just keep comparing this to Daredevil because, I don't want to do that, but it does, I think it's a good metric, at least for me, just to compare what I've seen from this universe, to what I'm going to see with the new shows. And I think one of the biggest detriments, too, that I realized of why this show wasn't captivating me, hooking me, on making me want to watch a new episode every single night. I watched this show over the span of maybe 3 or 4 weeks. It took a while, honestly, and it was because of a couple things. Number one, and I'll get to the things I really liked about the show in just a second, but I just want to clear these things out of the way before we do. Number one, though, one of the reasons why it was a little harder for me to get on board with the show is because of the side characters. You don't realize this until you take a step back and see that it's missing, but the side characters in Daredevil are so crucial to the show. That's why it was baffling when we found out that in the original concept of Daredevil Born Again, that Foggy and Karen weren't even going to be there. They were going to kill Foggy off screen, and Punisher, John Bernthal was like, "No, I don't want to do what you're making me do here. This is terrible. This is not what the Punisher character is all about." And it's because the DNA of these shows are the side characters: Foggy, Karen, Punisher, Frank Castle, Ben Urich, in the first season of Daredevil, right? And all of these characters, come together, Elektra, to make a really rich tapestry of unique personalities, even Stick, right? But the core characters of obviously, Nelson, Murdock, and Paige, right? Those three create that core of why you care not just about Matt, but about everything that he's going through the lens of also the characters that surround him. And to be honest with you, I don't think any character in Jessica Jones season 1 really elevated to that level. I like Trish enough. I don't really care about her that much as a character. I care about her insofar as she's Jessica's friend. But at the very end of the show, right, when Jessica's like, "I love you," I'm like, I get that, on the paper. But I don't really see that connection emotionally, if that makes sense. Other characters like Malcolm, what's her name? Robin, Ashley from The Boys. Other characters like, Simpson. Honestly, Simpson, I know he's going to be headed for a villainous arc. That's what I've heard. I couldn't really care less about him. And his turn too, from, person who was Killgraved to raving, drug-addled, steroid-using, whatever he's doing, supervillain, crazy maniac, was so sudden to me. And it came out of nowhere. And again, perhaps it was because I was watching the show in spurts. But when I got to that part of the show, I think it was maybe episode 8, 7, 8, 9, whatever. I was like, what in the world is going on here? Like, that's so bizarre. I did. The one big bright spot here, and I'm glad it is, because we're going to hopefully get to his show in just a second, is Luke Cage. I think Luke Cage was done great. I think that Mike Coulter was a really steadying presence in the show. And when he got Kilgraved, it was scary. And when you get to hear about his backstory, it's tragic, and the bar gets blown up and everything. It's great. I really enjoyed everything about Luke Cage in the show. But the other side characters it made it hard to care about a lot of other things that were going on throughout the season. And the other thing, I mentioned two things that made it hard for me to really get captivated by the show, was the repetitive nature of the story. And I'm going to tie this back to Kilgrave. I haven't talked about Kilgrave kind of intentionally, but let's talk about David Tennant as Kilgrave. First of all, performance. Great performance. He is terrifying. I mean, you believe that this guy is the worst of the worst in humanity. In his own twisted way, he believes that he's humanity's savior or whatever, or I don't even know what he believes, but he wants to be with Jessica Jones and so badly and all that kind of stuff. You believe that, right? You believe that he, in his twisted mind, thinks that there's a chance that he can love Jessica. And I'm all kudos to David Tennant. He gives a fantastic performance. That being said, the character and the development, there's only so much you can do with a kind of psychopath, murderous character, right? Because Kingpin is I don't think he's a psychopath, a sociopath, or whatever he is, with murderous tendencies, but he believes that there is some kind of self-righteousness in him to bring this city of New York up, and he has artistic tastes and things like that. It brings a very complicated version of that character to the screen, where you're like, okay, I mean, he's obviously crazy in his own way, but it's not like pure, Joker level, David Tennant, Kilgrave kind of level. And there's only so much you can do with a character like that across 13 episodes of television. And I got frustrated with the show because it felt like it was cycling through this process of, let's find Kilgrave, gets captured, escapes. Let's find Kilgrave, gets captured, escapes. Let's find Kilgrave, gets captured, escapes. And that goes on 2 or 3 or 4 times, that by the time you get to the last episode, I'm like, I feel like I've been watching the same show for the last few episodes. And I think that was a little bit frustrating. Now you get to the part at the end where it's like, okay, his powers are kind of a pathogen, and he's trying to enhance his powers, and that is fine. I think it's a little bit sci-fi for a show that was in general grounded, other than obviously the powers that the characters have. But, I think that was the part of the show where I was like, it's a little bit too late for that, And I think that I was a little bit annoyed by that. But again, those are things that I think generally didn't work for me. Let's talk about things that did work for me. Again, performances in general by the leads, Mike Coulter, Kristen Ritter, and David Tennant especially, were great. Fantastic. And I do think that, like I said before, with how you're not, as emotionally attached to Jessica Jones as you were with Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock, that the show still does a good job of showing that, she has pain, she has a backstory. She's an interesting character, and I think that the show does a really good job of that. I think that the way that the show is framed, is taught, and also the way that they are able to use Kilgrave as a character to exemplify his powers is really effective at times and very scary. I should also mention Carrie-Anne Moss as Hogarth, another character that I wasn't really invested in at all. Anyways, I just remember that. But, I think that in general, right, the reason I kept coming back to the show, I mean, other than, wanting to do this segment, but the reason I kept coming back just as a viewer was because I think that there is enough intrigue and interest here, and the concept was unique enough, right? A guy who can control people and do what he wants and is obsessed with this woman, Jessica Jones, and has done, again, some heinous things. But it in his own head believes that he is doing this in the right way, or at least for his own self-interest, I think is a very interesting concept. And I think that it is executed well for the most part. And I think that it helps to have actors who are able to deliver on that promise. And again, some of the scenarios are so interesting to see, okay, how can we get around a character like this, right? Putting him in that prison where you electrocute him, and also the fact that Jessica Jones at some point is not able to be affected by his powers, and like who is going to be affected by his powers, and who can you trust, all of that kind of stuff. And even the episode where Jessica is trying to turn him into a hero. All of those concepts, super interesting. I just think that the overall story, this is a show that felt like it could have been shortened by 3 or 4 or 5 episodes, because I just felt like we were doing the same thing. We're running the same thing back in circles. And I appreciate, especially now in the age of 6 to 8 episodes of television, that this show is 13 episodes. it just felt like the story kind of ran out at a certain point, and we were just doing the same thing of captured, escapes, captured, escapes, captured, escapes. And I think that there's only so much we can do from there. So I enjoyed the show enough, and I'm very glad I watched it, because at least this first season, and we'll see where we go. I'm gonna have to get through a lot more television. I'm currently rewatching Daredevil season 2, and so we'll hopefully talk about that in a few weeks. But I have to get through a lot more television to get to Jessica Jones season 2. So we'll see what happens there. But again, I think that what the biggest thing for me is I now understand Jessica Jones very much as a character. I'm excited to see her interact with Matt Murdock, because I think that's a big strength where, we get to see those two personalities clash. And I don't remember that much from the Defenders. So I think that's exciting. And we'll see where we go from there. So guys, what did you think of Jessica Jones season 1? When was the last time you watched it? And are you interested in rewatching it? Let me know in the comments down below.